The Grand Concord Hall had stood for 12,000 years. Its walls were made of stone brought from 100 conquered worlds. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath it. Golden light poured through windows cut from single pieces of crystal, each one worth more than entire planets. Emperor Valtrix X sat upon the eternal throne at the far end of the hall. He was old beyond measure, his scaled skin the color of faded bronze, his eyes still sharp after 800 years of rule. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had crushed rebellions, absorbed kingdoms, and brought peace to a galaxy that had known only war before his reign. Today would be another victory. A small one, perhaps, but satisfying nonetheless. The humans were coming to sign the treaty. 3 years ago, the Empire had moved to bring human space under proper administration. It should have been simple. Humans were young, their civilization barely 3 centuries old among the stars. They had fewer than 40 colony worlds. The Empire controlled over 12,000. But humans had fought. They had fought with a ferocity that surprised everyone. They had won battles they should have lost. They had held positions they should have abandoned. They had refused to break, even when breaking seemed like the only sensible option. The war had cost the Empire more than expected. Not enough to threaten its existence, but enough to become annoying. Enough for the Emperor's advisors to recommend negotiation rather than continued campaign. Valtrix had agreed, though it wounded his pride. He would give the humans their peace. He would be generous, as befitted his station. He would allow them to keep most of their worlds in exchange for tribute and proper respect. The great doors at the far end of the hall swung open. The herald announced the arrival of the human delegation. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka walked at the head of her people. She was small by human standards, her black hair streaked with gray, her face lined with the marks of years and worry. She wore a simple dark suit rather than the elaborate robes favored by imperial diplomats. Her staff followed behind her, equally plain, equally quiet. Valtrix studied her as she approached. He had learned to read the body language of many species over his long life. Humans were easy to understand. They showed their emotions on their faces, in their movements, in the tone of their voices. This one showed nothing. Her face was calm. Her steps were measured. She might have been walking to a routine meeting rather than the signing of a treaty that would determine her species' fate. Interesting, Valtrix thought, but ultimately meaningless. The humans stopped at the proper distance from the throne. Tanaka bowed, not deeply, but enough to satisfy protocol. Her staff did the same. Ambassador Tanaka, Valtrix said, his voice echoing through the vast hall. We welcome you to the Grand Concord. Today marks a new chapter in the relationship between our peoples. Your Majesty, Tanaka replied. Her voice was quiet but carried well. The United Human Government is grateful for this opportunity to establish lasting peace. Valtrix gestured to his chief minister, a tall creature with 4 arms and skin like polished wood. The minister stepped forward with a document case, opening it to reveal the treaty papers within. We have prepared the final terms, the minister said. Once signed, hostilities will cease, and our peoples will enter into a new era of cooperation. Tanaka nodded. May we review the terms before signing? Of course. The minister handed the documents to a human aide, who brought them to Tanaka. She began to read, and Valtrix watched her face carefully. At first, there was nothing. Then, slowly, her expression changed. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Valtrix had been reading people for centuries. He saw her jaw tighten. He saw her eyes narrow slightly. He saw her hands grip the papers, just a little too hard. Your Majesty, Tanaka said, looking up from the documents. These terms differ from what was discussed in previous sessions. We have made some adjustments, Valtrix said smoothly. Upon reflection, we felt the original terms were too generous. They did not properly account for the costs the Empire has incurred during this unfortunate conflict. Too generous, Tanaka repeated. Her voice was flat. Indeed. Valtrix leaned forward slightly. The new terms require complete disarmament of human military forces beyond a basic planetary defense capability, annual tribute payments to the Imperial Treasury, and the transfer of 3 human colony worlds to Imperial administration. The hall was silent. Valtrix's courtiers watched with barely concealed satisfaction. The other alien ambassadors present looked on, with the detached interest of those watching a small animal being cornered by a predator. Which 3 worlds? Tanaka asked. Meridian, New Shanghai, and Wellington Prime, the minister answered. They will serve as buffer zones between human space and the greater empire. Tanaka looked at the papers again. Then she looked at her staff. None of them spoke, but something passed between them. Some understanding that needed no words. Your Majesty, Tanaka said, I must ask for clarification. Are these terms final? Valtrix smiled. It was a smile he had used many times before, on many species and many negotiations. It was the smile of absolute power, of certainty, of a being who had never lost and never would. Ambassador, you should understand something. The Empire has been patient. We have allowed these negotiations to proceed despite the insult of human resistance. We have offered peace when we could have simply taken what we wanted by force. He spread his hands in a gesture of magnanimity. These terms are more than fair. Your people should be grateful they are being offered anything at all. Many in my court argued that we should simply continue the war until humanity learned proper submission. The courtiers murmured their agreement. Some laughed softly. You fought well, Valtrix continued. We acknowledge this. Your species has spirit. But spirit alone does not win wars. Numbers win wars. Resources win wars. Time wins wars. And the Empire has more of all 3 than humanity could ever hope to match. He leaned back on his throne. Take the terms as they are, Ambassador. Sign the treaty. Go home to your people and tell them that the war is over, that peace has been achieved, and that their future, while perhaps not what they hoped, is at least secure. Tanaka stood very still for a long moment. She looked at the documents in her hands. She looked at the Emperor on his throne. She looked at the vast hall with its ancient stones and its crystal windows and its golden light. Then she closed her folder. Your Majesty, she said, on behalf of the United Human Government, I must inform you that we cannot accept these terms. Valtrix raised an eyebrow. Cannot or will not? Will not, Tanaka said. The terms you have offered are not terms for peace. They are terms for surrender. They would leave our people defenseless, impoverished, and diminished. No responsible government could accept them. Then your people will face the consequences of continued war. Perhaps. Tanaka straightened her shoulders. Or perhaps not. Either way, the human delegation is withdrawing from these negotiations, effective immediately. She handed the documents back to her aide. Her staff began to gather their materials. We thank your Majesty for clarifying your position, Tanaka continued. It has been educational. Valtrix's eyes narrowed. You understand what you are doing? You are walking away from peace. You are condemning your people to more war, more death, more suffering. No, your Majesty. You are the one who has done that. Tanaka's voice was still calm, still quiet, but there was something in it now. Something that made several of the courtiers shift uncomfortably. We came here in good faith, prepared to sign a fair agreement. You chose to change the terms. You chose to demand our subjugation rather than our partnership. She bowed again, the same shallow bow as before. We will not trouble you further. Goodbye, Your Majesty." The human delegation turned and walked toward the great doors. Their footsteps echoed in the sudden silence of the hall. No one spoke. No one moved to stop them. At the doors, Tanaka paused and looked back. "One more thing, Your Majesty. In our culture, we have a saying, pride goes before a fall. I hope, for both our sakes, that you will think about what happened here today." Then she was gone. The doors closed behind her with a sound like thunder. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, one of the courtiers laughed nervously. "Well, that was dramatic. How long do you think before they come crawling back?" Others joined in the laughter. The tension broke. Soon the hall was filled with the sound of voices predicting human capitulation within weeks, perhaps days. Valtrix did not laugh. He sat on his throne and stared at the closed doors. His intelligence chief, a small creature with gray skin and too many eyes, moved closer to the throne. "Your Majesty? Is something wrong? Did you see her face?" Valtrix asked quietly. "Your Majesty? When she walked out, did you see her face?" The intelligence chief thought about it. "She seemed calm, Your Majesty." "Yes," Valtrix said. "She did." He tapped his fingers on the arm of his throne. In 800 years, he had watched countless diplomats leave failed negotiations. Some left angry. Some left afraid. Some left desperate, already calculating how quickly they could return with better terms. Tanaka had left calm. Tanaka had left like someone who had made a decision and was completely at peace with it. Tanaka had left like someone who knew exactly what would happen next. Double the intelligence assets in human space. Valtrix. 3 months had passed since the human delegation walked out of the Grand Concord Hall. 3 months of silence. Lord Admiral Korath stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment, and stared at the stars. Behind him, officers moved quietly, afraid to disturb his thoughts. In front of him, the border of human space stretched across the darkness like an invisible line. Nothing moved out there. Nothing had moved for weeks. It was wrong. Everything about this situation was wrong, and Korath knew it even if no one else at court wanted to admit it. He was the greatest military mind the Empire had produced in centuries. He had won 43 campaigns, conquered 11 civilizations, and never lost a single major engagement. The Emperor trusted him completely, which was why Korath had been given command of the 500 warships now patrolling this border. It was supposed to be a show of force, a reminder to the humans that the Empire was powerful, that resistance was foolish, that they should return to the negotiating table and accept whatever terms they were offered. Instead, the humans had simply ignored them. The door behind Korath opened. His aide entered, carrying a datapad. "My lord, the latest intelligence summary." Korath took the pad without turning around. He read it quickly, then read it again, more slowly. His expression did not change, but his grip on the pad tightened. "This is everything?" he asked. "Yes, my lord. Human military activity remains at peacetime levels. No fleet mobilization. No movement of reserves. No increase in production at known shipyards. And their response to our patrol fleet?" The aide hesitated. "None, my lord. They have acknowledged our presence, but taken no action. Their border stations remain staffed, but with minimal crews. Their defense platforms are active, but unmanned." Korath turned finally to look at his aide. "They have pulled back their main forces." "Yes, my lord." "Where?" We don't know, my lord. They simply withdrew into the interior of their space. We cannot track them beyond a certain point. Their sensor jamming is surprisingly effective." Korath nodded slowly. He set down the datapad and walked to the viewport. The stars stared back at him, keeping their secrets. "Tell me," he said quietly, What does the court say about all this? The aide shifted uncomfortably. They say the humans are surrendering, my lord. They say the show of force has worked. They say it's only a matter of time before the human government contacts us to resume negotiations. And what do you say? The aide was silent for a long moment. Then, very carefully, he said, I say that I have never seen a surrender that looks like this, my lord. Korath almost smiled. No, neither have I. He had studied human history extensively during the war. It was a bloody history, full of conflict and cruelty and terrible weapons. But it was also a history of survival. Humans had fought each other for thousands of years before reaching the stars. And through all that fighting, one pattern emerged again and again. Humans did not surrender easily. They did not give up because an enemy was stronger. They found ways to fight. They adapted. They endured. They waited. The silence was not surrender. Korath was certain of that. But what was it? On Throne Prime, the capital of the Empire, others were asking the same question. Trade Minister Zelak sat in her office, surrounded by reports that made no sense. Human trade routes had changed overnight after the failed negotiations. Not closed, exactly, but restructured. Human merchants still moved through space, still bought and sold goods, but they no longer docked at Imperial stations. They no longer responded to hails from Imperial vessels. Zelax had sent 3 separate delegations to human commercial outposts, seeking to re-establish normal trade relations. Each delegation had been received politely, given refreshments, and then firmly told that human commercial policy was under review. When pressed for details, the humans simply smiled and changed the subject. It was infuriating. It was also terrifying in a way that Zelax could not quite explain. Trade was her weapon, her source of power, her way of understanding the galaxy. She could read the intentions of any species through their economic activity. She could not read humans. Their economy continued to function, but it had turned inward. They were trading among themselves, building among themselves, preparing for something among themselves. But what? The Emperor had dismissed her concerns. Let them sulk, he had said. When their economy suffers from the loss of imperial trade, they will come around. But their economy was not suffering. That was the problem. Humans seemed perfectly content to do without imperial trade, as if they had never needed it in the first place. As if, Zelax thought with growing unease, they had been preparing for this possibility all along. In the vast archives beneath the Imperial Intelligence Service, a young analyst named Varric worked alone. He was nobody important, just a junior processor assigned to monitor human communications. It was boring work, mostly. Humans talked a lot, sent countless messages to each other, filled their networks with trivial information. Finding anything useful was like searching for a single grain of sand on a beach. But Varric was patient, and he was thorough, and he had noticed something strange. Over the past 3 months, certain phrases had appeared with increasing frequency in human military communications. They were never explained, never defined, just used as if everyone knew what they meant. The harvest is patient. Seeds planted in peace, reaped in war. The reserve stands ready. Varric had flagged these phrases for review, but his superiors had shown little interest. Human metaphors, they said. Cultural references. Nothing important. But Varric kept digging. He pulled old files, compared current communications to those from before the war, looked for patterns that others had missed. He found something. During the first year of the war, human military commanders had referred repeatedly to something called defensive fleet elements. This was the force the Empire had fought. The ships and soldiers that had held the line against imperial expansion. But there was another term that appeared occasionally, always in classified channels, always quickly deleted. Varric only found it because someone had made a mistake and failed to properly scrub a transmission. Reserve contingent. What was the reserve contingent? Varric did not know. The term appeared in no official documents, no strategic analyses, no intelligence reports. It was a ghost, a shadow, a phrase without context. But whatever it was, humans seemed to believe it was important. Important enough to hide. Important enough to keep secret, even from their own people. Varric prepared a report and sent it up the chain of command. Then he went back to work, searching for more ghosts in the endless stream of human data. At the border, Admiral Korath made a decision. He ordered his fleet to advance. Not an attack, just a probe. A few ships pushing into human space to see what response they might provoke. The response was nothing. Human defense platforms tracked the Imperial ships but did not fire. Human patrol vessels observed from a distance but did not engage. The Imperial ships pushed deeper, past the normal border, into territory that should have been defended. Still nothing. Korath called back his probe force and studied the data they had collected. The humans had simply let them in. No resistance, no warnings, no threats. Just calm observation, as if Imperial warships wandering through human space was a matter of no concern. It made no sense, unless the humans had nothing to fear from a few hundred Imperial ships. Unless they knew something that the Empire did not. Korath thought about the silence. He thought about the withdrawn fleets. He thought about the calm faces of human diplomats and the quiet withdrawal of human trade. He thought about a species that had survived thousands of years of war against itself and had emerged, united enough to challenge the greatest power in the galaxy. He thought about what it would take to make such a species unafraid of the Eternal Empire. The answer that came to him was not comforting. He sat down at his command console and began composing a message to the Emperor. It was not a message Valtrix would want to receive. It was not a message that would make Korath popular at court. But it was a message that needed to be sent. Your Majesty, he wrote, I must advise extreme caution in our dealings with humanity. The patterns of their behavior suggest not weakness, but supreme confidence. I believe we have made a significant error in our assessment of their capabilities. I recommend we make immediate diplomatic overtures before this situation deteriorates further. He sent the message and waited for a response. The response came 3 days later. It was short. Admiral Korath, your concerns are noted, but not shared. Continue patrol operations. Await further orders. The Emperor. Korath read the message twice. Then he deleted it and returned to his vigil at the viewport. The stars were still silent. The humans were still waiting. And somewhere in the darkness, Korath knew something was waking up. Something old and patient and terrible. He just hoped that when the rest of the Empire finally realized what they were facing, it would not be too late. 6 months after the walkout, Intelligence Chief Serene stood outside the Emperor's private chambers and tried to control her breathing. She had served the Empire for 200 years. She had delivered news of wars, assassinations, plagues, and rebellions. None of it had prepared her for what she was about to say. The door opened. A servant gestured for her to enter. Emperor Valtrix X sat at a simple desk, reading reports by the light of a single lamp. He looked up as Serene approached, and she saw something in his eyes that she had never seen before. Weariness, maybe even fear. You have something, he said. It was not a question. Yes, Your Majesty. Serene clutched her datapad like a shield. I must warn you, the information I carry is disturbing. My analysts have verified it 5 times. I have personally confirmed the key findings. There is no error. Valtrix set down his papers. Tell me. Serene took a breath. Your Majesty, We have fundamentally misunderstood humanity's military capability. The forces we fought during the 3-year war were not their main strength. They were a fraction. A small fraction. Explain. During the war, human military communications referred to their combat forces as defensive fleet elements. We assumed this was a bureaucratic term, a name for their navy. We were wrong. Serene activated her datapad and projected an image into the air between them. It showed a star map of human space, with red dots marking known military installations. These are the positions we confirmed during the war. Shipyards, bases, defense platforms. We estimated total human combat capacity at approximately 3,000 capital ships, with appropriate support vessels. She touched the pad again. The map changed. New dots appeared. Blue ones, hundreds of them. Then thousands. These are the positions we have now confirmed through deep intelligence penetration. Hidden shipyards and asteroid fields. Secret bases built in the moons. Dormant fleet groups scattered throughout the outer reaches of human space. Valtrix stared at the map. How many ships? At minimum, 38,000 capital ships. Possibly more. We cannot get accurate counts on several major installations. The number hung in the air. Valtrix said nothing. Your Majesty, Serene continued, her voice carefully controlled. The force we fought represented less than 8% of human military capacity. Perhaps as little as 5%. They call this hidden strength the reserve contingent. That's impossible. Valtrix's voice was flat. They are a young species. They don't have the industrial capacity to build such a force. They do, Your Majesty. They have been building it for 40 years. Serene brought up another display. This one showed industrial data, production figures, resource allocation charts. Humanity began construction of their reserve contingent before first contact with any alien species. They looked at the stars and assumed that whatever they found out there might be hostile. They prepared accordingly. 40 years, Valtrix said slowly. They have been building a hidden war machine for 40 years. Yes, Your Majesty. In secret, using hidden facilities, funded through methods we still don't fully understand. Every ton of metal, every fusion core, every weapon system, all of it produced and stored against the possibility of exactly the situation they now face. Valtrix stood and walked to his window. Outside, the lights of Throne Prime glittered in the darkness. Millions of beings going about their lives, unaware of what their Emperor had just learned. Why didn't they use it? He asked. If they had this force, why didn't they deploy it during the war? Serene hesitated. I have a theory, Your Majesty, though I cannot prove it. Share it. The humans came to the negotiating table in good faith. They fought us to a standstill using a fraction of their strength, and then they offered us peace. Equal partnership. Mutual respect. She paused, choosing her words carefully. In human culture, there is great value placed on offering someone a chance to make the right choice. They call it mercy or grace, or giving someone the benefit of the doubt. I believe humanity was offering us exactly that. A chance to become partners instead of enemies. And I refused, Valtrix said quietly. You demanded their submission, Your Majesty. You asked them to give up their military, pay tribute, and surrender their territory. You treated them as a defeated enemy when they were anything but. And now? Serene brought up one final display. It showed human space, with new markers appearing one by one. Ship movements. Fleet activations. Weapon systems coming online. Now, Your Majesty, the reserve contingent is waking up. All of it. Over the past month, we have detected massive power signatures from previously dormant installations. Ships that have been cold for decades are being activated. Crews are moving to their stations. They are preparing for war. I believe so, Your Majesty. but not the kind of war we experienced before. That was a defensive action, designed to hold us off while they determined our intentions. This, she gestured at the display. This is mobilization for total war. Valtrix turned from the window. His face was unreadable, but his hands were shaking slightly. How long until they are fully mobilized? Weeks, perhaps days. Our intelligence in human space has become increasingly difficult to maintain. They are actively hunting our agents now. And if they attack? Serene lowered her eyes. Our military assessments suggest complete Imperial defeat within 6 months. We would lose 80% of our fleet in the first major engagement. After that, she shook her head. Human forces would reach Throne Prime within the year. The room was silent. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed the hour. There's more, Your Majesty. More? Throughout the war, humans were learning. Every battle, every engagement, every tactical exchange. They were studying us, recording how we fight, how we think, how we react under pressure. Serene's voice dropped. They now know our military doctrine better than we know theirs. They know our weaknesses. They know exactly where to strike. Valtrix walked back to his desk and sat down heavily. For a long moment, he simply stared at the datapad in Serene's hands. When I rejected their terms, he said finally, when I demanded their submission, I was doing it to a power that could have destroyed us from the beginning. Yes, Your Majesty. They showed restraint. They offered peace. They gave us a chance to be reasonable. Yes, Your Majesty. And I laughed at their ambassador and told her to be grateful. Serene said nothing. There was nothing to say. Valtrix closed his eyes. In 800 years, he had made many mistakes. He had trusted the wrong advisors, pursued the wrong strategies, judged situations incorrectly. But he had always survived. He had always found a way forward. This was different. This was not a mistake that could be corrected through clever maneuvering or political pressure. This was a fundamental miscalculation, a failure to understand an enemy that was not really an enemy at all. Humanity had wanted friendship. They had wanted partnership. They had wanted to join the galactic community as equals, bringing their strength and their wisdom to a galaxy that needed both. And he had spat on their offer because he could not imagine a young species deserving respect. Can we stop them? He asked. If they attack? No, Your Majesty. Our simulations are unanimous. In a full-scale conflict with mobilized human forces, the Empire falls. Can we negotiate? I don't know, Your Majesty. We rejected their generous terms once. They may not be inclined to offer them again. Valtrix opened his eyes. Send for Admiral Korath. And summon my council. All of them, immediately. Serene bowed and turned to leave. Serene? She stopped at the door. In your estimation, Valtrix said, what do the humans want now? After everything that has happened? Serene considered the question carefully. I have studied them extensively, Your Majesty. I have read their literature, their philosophy, their history, and I believe that what they want has not changed. Partnership? Yes, but they are done asking. They are done hoping we will see reason. They have shown us their strength, not because they want war, but because they want us to understand that war is not a threat. It is a certainty, unless we change. They want us to come to them. I believe so, Your Majesty. I believe they want you to come to them, personally, not as a conqueror seeking surrender, but as an equal seeking peace. Valtrix nodded slowly. Leave me. I need to think. Serene left the chambers. Behind her, the Emperor sat alone in the darkness, contemplating the ruins of his assumptions and the terrifying shape of the truth. Humanity had been patient. Humanity had been merciful. Humanity had been kind. And now, having been pushed too far, Humanity was showing the galaxy what patience and mercy and kindness had been protecting everyone from all along. The harvest, it seemed, was ready. The council chamber erupted in chaos the moment Admiral Korath finished presenting the intelligence findings. War Minister Dex slammed his fist on the table. We must strike first. Hit their shipyards before they can fully mobilize. Destroy their production capacity. With what forces? Korath replied calmly. We have 500 ships at the border. They have 38,000. Even if we threw every vessel in the Imperial Navy at them, we would be outnumbered 3-1. Then we negotiate. Offer them better terms. This from Foreign Minister Oryx, his voice thin with barely controlled fear. Surely they can be reasoned with. We tried reasoning with them, Korath said. His Majesty rejected their terms and demanded their submission. They walked out. They have not responded to any diplomatic overtures since. Then we find leverage. Their colonies, their trade routes, their colonies are defended by forces we cannot match. Their trade routes are now internal. They have no external dependencies we can exploit. Korath looked around the table at faces ranging from terrified to furious. There is no leverage. There is no military solution. There is only the reality of our situation. Emperor Valtrix Ix listened to the arguing with growing weariness. He had been listening for hours now, watching his council tear itself apart trying to find a solution that did not exist. Finally, he raised his hand. The room fell silent. Korath, he said, your assessment. If we do nothing, what happens? The Admiral straightened. If we do nothing, Your Majesty, one of two things occurs. Either the humans attack, in which case we lose everything, or they wait, building their strength even further while our own power slowly erodes. Eventually, the result is the same. And if we attack first, we lose faster. Their defensive systems are fully active. Their forces are positioned to counter any Imperial incursion. The simulations suggest we would be destroyed before reaching any meaningful targets. Valtrix nodded slowly. And if we send diplomats? We have tried, Your Majesty. 3 separate delegations in the past month. All were received politely and sent home with no response. The humans are done talking to messengers. The implication hung in the air. The humans were done talking to messengers. But perhaps they would talk to someone else. Trade Minister Zelak spoke up, her voice hesitant. Your Majesty, surely you are not considering. I am. The council stared at him in shock. Your Majesty, War Minister Dex said carefully, for an emperor to personally travel to the territory of a hostile power. It has never been done. It would be seen as weakness, capitulation, submission. Would it? Valtrix looked at his war minister with ancient, tired eyes. Or would it be seen as wisdom? The wisdom to recognize when a situation has changed beyond old solutions? The other vassal states will take it as a sign of imperial decline. There could be uprisings, rebellions. If humanity destroys our fleet and Mars on Throne Prime, I suspect those vassal states will have much bigger concerns. Valtrix stood from his throne. No, I have made my decision. I will go to Earth myself and request an audience with the human government. Your Majesty, several voices began at once. This is not a discussion. Valtrix's voice was sharp. I created this situation through my arrogance and my pride. I insulted their ambassador. I rejected their offer of friendship. I treated them as inferiors when they were anything but. He paused, and something in his expression softened. Perhaps it is fitting that I should be the one to try to repair what I broke. Admiral Korath stepped forward. Your Majesty, I will accompany you. No, you will remain here and prepare our defenses as best you can, in case I fail. Valtrix allowed himself a small, bitter smile. I will take my personal ship and a ceremonial escort. Nothing that could be seen as a threat. And if they refuse to see you, then we will know where we stand. But I do not think they will refuse. Valtrix looked at the data displays still showing the massive human fleet, the countless ships waiting in the darkness. They built all of this because they feared us. But they offered us peace anyway. They are not monsters. They are not mindless aggressors. They are a people who hoped for the best while preparing for the worst. He gathered his robes around him. Perhaps, if I approach them with the humility I should have shown from the beginning, they will give me one more chance. The council watched in silence as their emperor left the chamber. None of them expected to see him alive again. 3 days later, the imperial vessel Eternal Dignity dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of human territory. It was a small ship by imperial standards, elegant rather than powerful, designed for ceremony rather than war. Valtrix stood on the bridge, watching the human border stations appear on the sensors. Behind him, his ceremonial guards stood at attention, their weapons purely ornamental. "Transmit our identification," he ordered, "and our request for passage." The communications officer complied. Then they waited. An hour passed. Then 2. The border stations tracked them but did not respond. Human ships could be seen on long-range sensors, watching from a distance. "Your Majesty," the ship's captain said nervously, "perhaps we should. We wait." They waited. On the 4th day, a single human vessel emerged from hyperspace beside them. It was a diplomatic courier, small and unarmed. Its identification beacon marked it as belonging to the human government. A communication came through. A face appeared on the screen. Valtrix recognized her immediately. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka looked at him across the void. Her face was as calm as it had been the day she walked out of the Grand Concord Hall. "Your Majesty," she said. "This is unexpected. Ambassador Tanaka." Valtrix inclined his head. "I have come to request an audience with your government. You could have sent a message. Messages can be ignored. I wanted you to see that I am serious." Tanaka studied him for a long moment. "You have come alone? No fleet, no army? A ceremonial escort only. I am not here to threaten or demand. I am here to ask. Ask for what?" Valtrix took a breath. In 800 years, he had never spoken words like the ones he was about to say. "I am here to ask for the opportunity to correct a mistake. I treated your people with disrespect. I dismissed your offer of friendship. I demanded submission when I should have offered partnership." He met her eyes through the screen. "I am here, Ambassador, to apologize, and to ask if there is still a path to peace." Tanaka's expression did not change. "The United Human Council will hear your request. Follow me." The journey to Earth took 6 days. 6 days of traveling through human space, past stations and colonies, and the vast apparatus of human civilization. And past ships? So many ships. Valtrix stood at the viewport and watched them pass. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons. Carriers bristling with firecraft. Battle cruisers, destroyers, frigates, support vessels. All of them arranged in perfect formation. All of them fully armed, all of them waiting. Tanaka found him there on the 3rd day. She stood beside him and said nothing for a long while. "How many?" Valtrix asked finally. "Does it matter?" "I suppose not." He watched a formation of heavy cruisers drift past, their weapons dark but ready. "I am curious, though. Why did you show me this? You could have taken a different route." "We could have," Tanaka agreed. "But you needed to see. To intimidate me?" "No." Tanaka turned to face him. "To help you understand. Your Majesty, my people are not warriors by choice. We built all of this because we were afraid. Afraid of what we might find in the stars. Afraid of being helpless. afraid of extinction. She gestured at the fleet outside. Every ship out there represents fear transformed into preparation. Weakness transformed into strength. We hoped we would never have to use any of it. And now? Tanaka's expression was sad. Now we wait to see if hope still has meaning. On the 6th day, they reached Earth. The human homeworld hung in space like a blue and white jewel, beautiful beyond description. Valtrix had seen thousands of worlds in his long life, but something about this one made him pause. Perhaps it was knowing what had been born here, what had grown here, what had looked up at the stars with fear and wonder and determination, and had built the greatest hidden power the galaxy had ever known. "We're receiving landing clearance," the captain reported. "We're to proceed to Geneva." Valtrix straightened his robes. "Take us down." As the Imperial vessel descended through Earth's atmosphere, Valtrix looked out at the clouds and the oceans and the green lands below. Somewhere down there, the leaders of humanity were waiting. He did not know what they would say. He did not know if they would forgive his arrogance or punish his pride. But he knew, with absolute certainty, that everything he had believed about power and strength and dominance was wrong. True power did not come from conquest or fear or submission. True power came from the ability to choose mercy when you could have chosen destruction. The humans had that power. They had always had it. Now, Valtrix could only hope they would choose to use it one more time. The council chamber of the United Human Government was nothing like the Grand Concord Hall, where the Imperial throne room was designed to overwhelm with size and grandeur. This room was built to function. Simple walls of pale stone. Comfortable chairs arranged in a semicircle. Large windows looking out over the city of Geneva and the mountains beyond. There was no throne here, just a long table where the members of the United Human Council sat, waiting. Emperor Valtrix X walked in alone. His ceremonial guards had been asked to wait outside, and he had agreed without argument. He was in human territory now, surrounded by human power. If they wanted him dead, his guards would make no difference. The humans rose as he entered, a gesture of respect that surprised him. A tall man with dark skin and graying hair stepped forward. His face was lined but strong, his eyes sharp and thoughtful. "Your Majesty, I am Marcus Eulerin, President of the United Human Council. Welcome to Earth." Valtrix inclined his head. "President Eulerin, thank you for receiving me. Please, sit." Eulerin gestured to a chair that had been placed facing the council. Not below them, not above them, equal. Valtrix sat. The council members returned to their seats. For a moment, everyone was silent. Then Eulerin spoke. "Your Majesty, before we begin, I want you to understand something. You are not a prisoner here. You are not a hostage. You are our guest, and you will be treated with the dignity your position deserves. I appreciate that, President. I also want you to understand that we know why you have come. We know about the intelligence your people have gathered. We know you have seen our fleet, our strength, our preparations." Eulerin folded his hands on the table. "You have come because you realize that war between our peoples would end badly for the Empire." "Yes," Valtrix said simply. "I have come because I finally understand the situation, and because I have made terrible mistakes that I hope to correct." The council members exchanged glances. One of them, a woman with silver hair and sharp features, leaned forward. "What mistakes would those be, Your Majesty?" Valtrix met her eyes. 6 months ago, Ambassador Tanaka came to my court in good faith, prepared to sign a fair peace agreement. I changed the terms at the last moment. I demanded your disarmament, your tribute, your territory. I treated your people as conquered subjects when you were anything but. He looked around the room at each face in turn. I did this because I was arrogant. Because I had ruled for 8 centuries and had never encountered a power I could not dominate. Because I looked at your young civilization and saw weakness where there was strength, submission where there was patience, fear where there was restraint. He paused. I was wrong. I was profoundly, dangerously wrong. And I have come here to admit that and to ask if there is still a possibility for peace between our peoples. The council was silent. Then President Euler nodded slowly. Your Majesty, we appreciate your candor. It takes courage to admit mistakes, especially for someone in your position. He glanced at his fellow council members. We have discussed your situation extensively since we learned you were coming. We have debated what terms to offer you, what demands to make, what concessions to require. Valtrix braced himself. Here it came. The price for his arrogance. We have decided, Euler continued, to offer you the same terms we offered 6 months ago. The exact same terms, unchanged. Valtrix stared at him. I don't understand. The silver-haired woman spoke. Your Majesty, what terms were you expecting? Demanding, punitive. You have the power to dictate whatever you want. You could demand our disarmament, our territory, our submission. Everything I demanded of you, and more. We could, Euler agreed. But we will not. Why? The president stood and walked to the window. He looked out at the mountains, ancient and patient, snow-capped against the blue sky. Your Majesty, humanity has a long and bloody history. For thousands of years, we did to each other what empires always do. We conquered. We subjugated. We demanded tribute and submission. We built kingdoms on the suffering of others. He turned back to face Valtrix. And every single one of those kingdoms fell. Every empire we built, we eventually destroyed. Because conquest does not create loyalty. Fear does not create stability. Power built on subjugation contains the seeds of its own destruction. He returned to his seat. When we reached the stars, we made a decision. We would not repeat the mistakes of our past. We would not build an empire of conquest. We would prepare for war, yes, because the universe is dangerous and we are not fools. But we would always seek peace first. We would always offer friendship before we offered violence. Even when you could simply take what you want. Especially then. Euler leaned forward. Your Majesty, we have the power to destroy your empire. We have the ships, the weapons, the soldiers. We could sweep across the galaxy and take everything you have built. And then what? We would spend centuries fighting rebellions, crushing resistance, maintaining control through force. He shook his head. No, that is not the future we want. We want trading partners, not subjects. We want allies, not vassals. We want a galaxy where different species work together, share knowledge, and help each other grow. And that can only happen if we treat others the way we want to be treated. Valtrix was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, and what if I had not come? What if I had attacked instead? Then we would have defended ourselves. We would have used every ship, every weapon, every soldier at our disposal. And we would have won. Euler's voice was matter-of-fact. But we would have taken no pleasure in it. We would have mourned every death on both sides. And when it was over, we would have helped rebuild what we had destroyed. You would have helped your enemies rebuild? You would not have been our enemies anymore. You would have been a defeated people in need of help. That is different. Valtrix looked at the council members. Some were old, some young. Some looked fierce, others gentle. But all of them nodded in agreement with their president's words. This, he realized, was what he had failed to understand. Humanity was not powerful despite their restraint. They were powerful because of it. They had built their strength on principles rather than conquest, on patience rather than aggression. They had created something the Empire never could, a civilization that did not need to dominate others to feel secure. "I accept your terms," he said. The original terms: partnership, mutual defense, shared trade, cultural exchange. Oilerin smiled. "We are glad to hear it, Your Majesty. But I have one question first." "Ask." Valtrix hesitated. Then he asked the question that had haunted him since he first saw the human fleet. "If I had not come, if I had chosen pride over wisdom and eventually attacked, what would you have done to my people? Not to my fleet, but to my people? The civilians, the worlds that had no part in the war." President Oilerin considered the question carefully. "We would have protected them. We would have ensured they had food, water, medicine, shelter. We would have helped them rebuild their governments, their economies, their lives. Even though they were your enemies, they would not have been our enemies. They would have been victims of their leaders' choices. We would have treated them as such." Ambassador Tanaka, who had been silent throughout, finally spoke. "Your Majesty, I told you once that in our culture, we value giving others a chance to make the right choice. But that is only half of the truth." She met his eyes. "The other half is that when mercy is no longer an option, we do not become monsters. We become protectors. We fight not to destroy, but to save. Even those who were our enemies." Valtrix felt something he had not felt in centuries. His eyes grew wet. He blinked, surprised by his own reaction. "I have ruled for 800 years, he said quietly. "I have seen countless species rise and fall. I have studied philosophy, strategy, and history. And in all that time, I have never encountered a people like you." He stood and bowed, not the shallow bow of protocol, but a deep bow of genuine respect. "I came here expecting to negotiate for my empire's survival. Instead, I have learned something far more valuable. I have learned how much I still have to learn." President Oilerin stood and extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting and agreement. "Then let us learn together, Your Majesty. Let us build something better than either of our peoples could build alone." Valtrix took his hand. "Yes, let us begin." The treaty was signed that day. The same treaty that had been offered 6 months before, unchanged in every detail. Humanity asked for nothing more than partnership. The Empire gave everything it had once demanded. As Valtrix prepared to leave Earth, Ambassador Tanaka walked with him to his ship. The mountains of Geneva glowed in the setting sun, and the air was cool and clean. "Ambassador," Valtrix said, "may I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "When you walked out of my court 6 months ago, were you afraid?" Tanaka considered the question. "I was sad, Your Majesty. Sad that it had come to that. Sad that you could not see what we were offering. But not afraid?" "No." She smiled slightly. "I knew what was coming. I knew you would eventually understand. The only question was how long it would take and how much it would cost. You could have shown me the fleet then. You could have intimidated me into accepting.